Na 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 na, na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye. Hey everyone, it's Christy and I am smiling because today is a happy day. Scott Walker dropped out of the race for the Republican nomination yesterday, and I thought I'd make a quick special bonus video giving my analysis as to why he was such a loser. So what I'm going to do is I have to kind of vent this out, so I'm going to have a little bit of a rant about Scott. But I'm going to put that at the end of the video, and then I'm going to do my analysis. I'm going to swap my time in reality with my time in the video, because what I'm going to do in this video is go over the 4 M's and explain how his campaign fell apart when it came to money, machinery, momentum, and message. And so yeah, we're going to get started with that in the video. If you're interested in watching me rant, then you can skip toward the end of the video where I'm going to do that. Let's look at his polling numbers and watch how he just cratered in the polls. So I've taken here the Real Clear Politics poll of polls, and you can see here that on the 1st of April, Scott Walker was in first place with 17.3%, an average of all the polls, and Jeb Bush was just behind him at 17%. Basically, they were in a statistical dead heat given the margins of errors that these polls are being aggregated from. So he, came in at the beginning of the year and was kind of seemed to be hot, and then as the year went on, this next poll moves us to the 30th of July. And this is when really the start of the downward trend. He'd already been at 17%, but this sort of July 30th date is a way to think about it. Today's now what, the 22nd of September. This is less than 2 months ago. Less than 9 weeks ago, he was right behind Donald Trump and ahead of Jeb Bush in the Real Clear Politics poll of polls. He stood next to Trump in the first debate. Looking back now, we can clearly see that Trump's entry into the campaign really hurt Scott Walker the most. And we're going to watch this precipitous downward trend over the next 2 slides. So by the 15th of August, so moving from basically like the 31st of July, 1st of August to the 15th, he'd gone from 13.7% down to 9.3%. He went from being in second into being third behind Jeb Bush. But then very quickly after that, by the 1st of September, he's down to 6.3%, and he's in 6th place. After Trump, Carson starts to move at this point. Jeb Bush is still holding his same amount of percent support at 9%, 9 to 10 that he's been floating along with since ever. Cruz is now ahead of him, Rubio is ahead of him, and Walker is fading fast. And then by the 15th of September, you can't even see Walker's number on this chart because it's so low. He's so far behind. But from the 15th, it's probably somewhere around, it's definitely under 4%, let's call it like 3%. And by the end, he's at 1.8% support. Breaking it down by the 4 M's, let's take each one of them in their own right and look at how Walker messed it up. Money. Walker, like Rick Perry, is leaving the race because he is having trouble raising money, which sounds really weird because he's got a super PAC that raised over $26 million. But of course, that is not the kind of money that you can use as a candidate. Your super PAC it's kind of like your second home. You've got to actually pay your mortgage on the house where your primary residence is. And a lot of campaigns can basically build a second home that's gorgeous, but then they can't afford the payments on the primary residence. They can't pay the mortgage. They can't pay their staffers. They can't pay rent. They can't buy ads. And even though they're swimming in money, it's not money that they can use as candidates. It's special interest money or money written by billionaires or millionaires who can just drop $100,000 on a candidate and do that because they expect a phone call every time that they call and need something. But you can't, you've got actually hard money you have to raise to pay your daily bills. And he couldn't do that because nobody really supported him. Real people supported him. Billionaires supported him. Rich people supported him. Real people, not so much. Walker's problem was that he couldn't raise enough of his own hard money to keep his campaign going. And he was so fiscally irresponsible. he was basically, he had more things that he was committed to paying for than he had income to pay it. So he's not a fiscal conservative at all. In fact, he's terrible with money. His campaign has only been going for a few months now, and it's already $100,000 in debt. Again, exposing the complete fraud this guy is. He doesn't know how to manage money. He is not smart when it comes to strategy or business sense. He's just an empty vessel that the Koch brothers fill up all the time and send out into the world to spread their manure all over the airwaves. So he had a burn rate that was he had a very high burn rate. So a burn rate is the ratio between total amount of money that you've raised and your cash on hand minus your reported debt. And people use this to calculate how quickly the campaign is going through cash, overhead, staff rates, all that kind of stuff. And Walker had made terrible, terrible money decisions when it came to how he was spending the money that he himself had raised. From this article in Forbes, you can see that the Associated Press reported that the Walker campaign was already $100,000 in debt, an astounding sum this early in the race. He had more than 90 staffers on his payroll, and that he was paying lavish sums to campaign interns and personal assistants. This is how you do poorly on the money M, by not raising enough money to cover your costs. It's a rookie mistake. And Rick Perry was struggling because he's been at this rodeo and he thought he did the same thing. He had a huge amount of money in the super PAC, couldn't raise money from real people. Scott Walker fell for the same mirage. Machinery. Every campaign needs human beings as infrastructures. And now, of course, in the digital age, you need digital infrastructures as well. All of this costs time, money, and talent. So a campaign will have a combination of paid and unpaid staffers who help distribute the workload in order to support the candidate. And that's kind of a bit of a Goldilocks problem of you don't want too many, because then you're going to get your burn rate up and you're paying people for stuff that isn't bringing you money in to cover their costs. You don't want to not have enough machinery, because then your campaign looks weak. You don't have volunteers. You don't have a visual presence at local events. You're not seen on television, these kinds of things, if you're not keeping up with making web ads, with making real ads. If your machinery isn't functioning properly, your campaign can't function properly. And what everyone wants to go for, of course, is just right, where you have enough people to do the work, but not so many people that you're paying them to do stuff that isn't going to bring you in money, keep the coffers filled, and you don't want so few that your campaign looks weak. And Walker just fell for the mirage of his early lead, thinking that his supporters were supporting him because they liked him. But I have a different interpretation of that when we get to momentum. Before moving on to momentum, we're going to discuss Scott Walker's message. I see two fundamental problems with Walker's GOP nomination message. Part one, the message. He is not an actual person. He's a Koch messenger. And his message was the message of the Koch brothers, which is union busting, union busting, union busting, force women to have carry every pregnancy to term, no matter what the woman's decision is or how it would affect her life or her family or her husband or her partner, and cut taxes on rich people and transfer taxpayer wealth to the pockets of private profit businesses. That's it. That is Scott Walker's message, and that's not a very appealing message if you're a 9-to-5er. It actually is pretty much the opposite of what you want to see in a candidate committed to economic growth. So the biggest problem, I think, with Walker hitching his wagon to the union star is the fact that there are basically no more unions in the US. The Republicans have managed to basically destroy unions in the US, and as a consequence, we've seen that the middle class wages have been destroyed right along with it. So Walker's big bully, I'm going to take on teachers and take away their rights, and that's going to show what a big, powerful man I am, doesn't really sell, because unions aren't the biggest threat that the radicals in the Republican primary who are voting in it are worried about. Let's just take a quick look at the state of union membership in the United States in 2012. As you can see, there are barely any states that have double-digit union membership. And those that do, really, there are a handful that have more than 15%. So Scott Walker's message was very good in an off-presidential year election cycle where people were feeling the economic strain of the financial crisis. And he could sell a message of, instead of increasing everybody's paid sick time, paid family leave, overtime benefits, let's take them away from other people and make their lives as shitty as yours instead of raising everybody's up. And that's a message that doesn't really sell all that great when people actually want to see income inequality addressed. Scott Walker doesn't have a solution to income inequality. His solution is getting rid of the minimum wage. I don't even know why this guy thought he was going to go anywhere, to be honest. Part two, the problem was the messenger. Scott Walker is a goober. He's not articulate. He's not someone you want to listen to for a long period of time. He's not an inspiring speaker. He's not a communicator of hope. He's annoying. He drones on like a bee. And just looking at his dumb face, I feel my IQ slipping away every time I have to look at him because he's such a hayseed. And that's, I think, part of the reason is that, I see him as a college dropout. He's a quitter. He's a person who can't finish what he starts. And, he does what's easy or things that are handed to him. And when he actually has to take risks, like work your way through college or finish your presidential, campaign, don't be a Pawlenty and drop out early, he doesn't have the spine for it. He runs away to what he feels comfortable with, his little bubble. So yeah, part of the problem of Scott Walker is Scott Walker. He's Mr. Not Ready for Prime Time. The Kochs controlled the candidate and his message. That was easy when it was just statewide. Walker could be a moron on the basics and get away with it because there wasn't the kind of 24/7 media coverage that you have in a presidential race. And he can't pull that kind of shit of just making stuff up and only having one statewide paper pick up on it. Everything adds up on the national level in a way that it doesn't seem to add up in quite the same way on the state level. And he was just exposed for the fraud that he's always been. And finally, on the topic of momentum, Walker was never Mr. Right for Republican primary voters, in my opinion. He was only ever Mr. Right for right now. He mistook the support he initially received as support for his candidacy and his message and him as a presidential candidate, where I think now looking back, we can really see that what people were responding to was the fact that he wasn't from Washington, that he was the closest thing to an outsider that they could get when they had basically U.S. senators to choose from, and Jeb Bush, who was, the third Bush to run. And when they had a really good alternative, they gave up this one-trick pony who could only really ever go on about union bashing, and they went over to somebody who is an infinite trick pony, Donald Trump, who keeps you entertained all the time. And Walker simply didn't have the strength of character to pull out a comeback in these kinds of clutch situations. He's got to be ahead or he can't hack it. And you can see when push came to shove, he gave his best performance in that second debate. And if that's the best that he could do, there's a reason why, he dropped in the polls. He's just not very good. And that momentum, again, really wasn't about Scott. It was about screw Washington, screw Washington, screw Washington. And he kind of didn't see that coming. So in conclusion, Scott Walker is simply a bad politician. Without the Koch brothers there to stage manage him and provide him with poll-tested messages, he simply fails. He misread initial support, in my opinion, as being about who he was rather than who he was not, a Washington insider. But when a better, more authentic candidate became available, people dropped him like a shit-filled diaper. The other things that we can take away is that Walker leaving the race doesn't help anyone because nobody likes him, nobody supports him. He's got some staff around who are desperate for jobs now that'll go, Marco Rubio, please take me in. You're also kind of look like Scott Walker, brown hair, kind of the same suits you wear. I can do the same thing for him I did for you that I did for him. But his leaving isn't going to impact the race at all. And finally, good riddance, Scott. We've kicked your ass off the national stage. Now all we have to do is kick your ass out of Wisconsin. And that's coming up next. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. I've been Christy, you've been awesome, and I'll see you next time I put a video up, I guess. Bye. Here's my reaction to the news. Scott Walker got loser. Oh my gosh, he's like, it's not even October. He's been running seriously for only a couple months and he's already out. This guy, I'm so happy to see him go, but he is awful, a terrible, terrible politician, a terrible person in office. He's a liar. He's just basically a puppet for the Koch brothers and anyone who's rich enough to stuff, if you put money up his ass, he'll say whatever you want. And he's lied to the American people. He's lied to the people of Wisconsin. He divided the people of Wisconsin. He's ruined the economy. Everywhere else has got better economic growth than he does. He promised 250,000 jobs, delivered less than that. The guy is a total waste of space. And the harm that he's done, my family are back in Wisconsin, they're in sales. And those businesses are really hurting if it's not, they're sort of like luxury things that they sell, let's say. But it depends on middle-class families having disposable incomes. And under Scott Walker, that's just not happening. Instead, he's stealing money from taxpayers and giving it to his cronies. And I can't even tell you, like one down, one to go. We've got him out of the national political game. Now we just have to get him out of Wisconsin politics because he is terrible, awful. There's really nothing good. There's nothing good I can say about Scott Walker other than I'm pretty sure he's going to lose next time. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed my little anti-Walker rant. I feel much better having got this off my chest. And I'm going to keep smiling because today is just going to be a happy day all day for me. Doesn't matter. Scott Walker, publicly humiliated on the national stage. It's been a long time coming and you know what? It feels pretty